She wasn't late, but they looked at her as if she were disturbing something more sacred than time itself. Emma Collins stood silently in front of the soundproof glass door of Studio 4A, the advanced composition class, where only 12 seats were available for 300 final-year students. In her hand was the admission letter, a monochrome laser print folded into quarters, the edges slightly bent from being pressed under the weight of her backpack. Inside, LED lights blinked on mixers, casting blue glows over weighted keyboards, glossy black monitor speakers, and gleaming silver MacBook Airs. She saw the silhouettes of 3 students, laughing blonde curls, AirPods Max on their ears, fingers tapping on Starbucks cups like they were laying down a trap beat for Gucci. The door swung open. A woman stepped out, lead instructor, Dr. Helena Mortensen, former producer at Atlantic Records. Her gaze paused on Emma's face for a beat, then dropped to her worn backpack, faded canvas shoes, and second-hand coat. "What do you need?" she asked, her voice not cold, but as empty as a track stripped of all bass. Emma handed her the letter. "Ah, the pilot scholarship. You're the first in that project." She nodded, then turned back inside. No invitation, no smile. Emma followed. The class paused for a few seconds. Everyone looked. Some eyes were merely curious, but others are programmed to spot flaws. A blonde girl turned around. Dior sneakers, a cashmere sweater, and a soft trail of Jo Malone perfume in the air. She squinted at the thing around Emma's neck. Beats Solo. Old, chipped casing. Peeling ear cushions. She tilted her head, voice sharpened just enough for the whole class to hear, "Oh my God, is that from a dumpster?" A laugh broke out, small but oddly loud, in the soundproofed room. "Guess the school's running a charity program in disguise. I thought we were here to study music, not endure sounds from dollar store toys." Emma didn't respond, but her fingers tightened on the strap of her backpack. Dr. Helena suddenly turned. "Collins, if you want to prove yourself, we can start now." A quiet wait what slipped from the room. "You'll be the first to present your arrangement. Right now. No assistance. No pre-mixed tracks. Use your own equipment." Emma removed her headphones and plugged the jack into her worn-out laptop. A faint static crackled. The screen flickered. She opened the file, a 32-bar harmony, written on free software. She knew it wouldn't sound good. She knew the audio would distort, but she still pressed play. The classroom fell silent. 1 beat, 2, then the snare hit weak off-tempo muffled bass. A piano note gasped. A loop fell behind the rhythm. Someone in the room grimaced. Another bowed their head in laughter. Emma stayed seated. No defense, no apology. Just quietly adjusted the volume and let each shaky note echo through a room built to despise anything that wasn't polished. None of them knew the arrangement Professor Helena had chosen to feature in this year's Academy brochure was the anonymous submission Emma had sent from a noisy internet cafe in Brooklyn. And that day, they laughed, because they thought they were watching a joke. But in truth, they were listening to a storm that hadn't yet been named. After the first class, Emma didn't leave. She stayed seated at the back, waiting for the room to empty before packing up. Her headphones still crackled. She adjusted a few settings, but she knew the problem wasn't the software. It was the way the whole room had looked at her. No one said anything after her presentation, not a single comment. But the worst things often begin in silence. The next morning, Emma received an email from the Academy. The first line sounded normal enough. "We acknowledge your serious learning attitude," but the next line was unmistakable. "Due to equipment limitations and to ensure learning quality for the class, you will be reassigned to the auxiliary practice room, Studio 1C, for the foreseeable future." Studio 1C was an old room in the basement. No soundproofing, no instructor, no modern systems, just a buzzing little speaker and cast-off adapters from other classes. People called it the Forgotten Room. Emma didn't protest. She simply replied, "I've received the notice. Thank you." That day, she still showed up to Studio 4A as usual. Still sat in the back, still silent. The class was forming groups for their first harmony assignment. Emma raised her hand to join. No one turned around. No one said no. They just ignored her as if she didn't exist in the room. Instructor Helena glanced around for a few seconds, then looked at her voice flat. "If no one is available, Collins can work alone. You'll have a chance to showcase your personal style." Right then, a male student from the middle row blurted out loud, "Personal style, like trash pickup, huh?" The class erupted in laughter. Some clapped, some slammed their desks in hysterics. Others said nothing, but laughed along as if this was normal, as if this was how the world worked. Emma sat still. Her hands stayed on the desk, but her spine curved slightly. Her face lowered as if she was searching for a dark corner beneath the harsh white lights. She didn't speak, didn't react. But in that moment, no one needed to turn to see her neck had flushed red all the way up to her ears. By the end of class, a video appeared in the group chat. They had recorded Emma's presentation from the previous day, but now it had distorted audio-added laugh tracks and a caption, "When you think a scholarship makes you a genius. But really, it just buys you broken headphones." Emma saw the video while riding the elevator back to the dorm. No one stood beside her yet. She still turned away. Not out of fear, but because she didn't want anyone to see her trying not to let her hands tremble. At lunch, her scholarship card didn't scan. The manager whispered, "The system probably hasn't updated. You'll need to pay cash." Emma pulled out her wallet. She had exactly $7. She picked the cheapest meal, a cold salad, and a cup of water. As she sat down at a table, a voice rang from the center of the cafeteria. The blonde girl again. "Her scholarship meals are allowed to sit here too." Another girl laughed. "The academy should put up signs. At least, we could avoid that cheap smell." A guy chimed in, "Careful everyone. Her chopsticks might still have glue on them from the charity kitchen." Emma didn't turn her head, didn't react. She kept eating slowly, steadily, her hands steady, her eyes dry. But that night, alone in her dorm, Emma opened her laptop, not to do homework. She started a new project, not for grades, not to please anyone, just to write a sound. That wouldn't let her disappear. Emma fell in love with music through the simplest of sounds. The knock on her door every morning from her mom, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, and the soft thud of her father's footsteps leaving for his night shift at the printing factory. Her house had no Bluetooth speaker, no piano, and certainly no soundproof studio. But each night, once everyone was asleep, Emma would crawl into the coat closet, put on her old headphones, open a music-making app on her phone, and start recording the sounds she imagined in her head. She never learned music theory. Her mother had found a PDF file about chords online and printed it using an old ink-smudged printer. Whenever Emma got the timing wrong, her mother would just smile and say, "As long as you can hear yourself in there, right or wrong doesn't really matter." The first time Emma submitted a piece to a competition was when she was 16, a statewide contest for high school students. She recorded it using phone earbuds, wrote the beat with free software, and submitted it under the name eCollins47. She didn't dare use her real name, afraid someone might trace it back and find out she lived in a subsidized housing block. And then she won. One of 5 winners. The judges didn't know who she was. No one knew she was a girl without a desk who balanced her laptop on a box of instant noodles just to make music. Only one person called her back, the coordinator of a scholarship program. Emma Collins, would you be interested in applying to the Manhattan Music Academy? You'll need a legal guardian to sign. Do you still have your parents? Her father had died when she was 12. A car accident occurred while working overtime. Her mother worked 3 jobs. No one had time to think about music, let alone New York. But her mother still printed the scholarship application, hand-wrote every field, and personally stitched up Emma's backpack the night before she left. Over there they won't know who you are, her mother said. But if you don't stop hearing music in your head, they'll have no choice but to listen. Emma brought those broken headphones with her to New York, not because she couldn't afford new ones, but because they were the only thing that connected her to home. Every time someone laughed at her, mocked her, or blocked her path, all she had to do was replay an old beat she once recorded with her mum, tapping her fingers on the table. That's why she hadn't walked away. That's why she didn't speak up. Because if she reacted, they would win. But if she survived day by day, class by class, night by night, mixing music with exhausted ears, then eventually the music would speak for her. And the most frightening thing wasn't being mocked. It was the possibility that one day the world would realize the girl they used to look down on was the one who wrote the melody they couldn't forget. In her 3rd week at the academy, Emma submitted her first harmony assignment. She did it alone, no group, no technical support. She built it from the ground up, recorded tapping sounds with a metal spoon in her dorm, layered synths using a virtual keyboard, and corrected every delay by sight because her headphones were misaligned. She submitted it via email on time. She didn't expect a high grade. She just wanted to finish. 3 days later, the class was called in to listen to a special arrangement that instructor Helena wanted to share. A prime example of youth creativity, she said. The class leaned in with excitement. The music began. Emma froze from the very first note. It was her track. Every audio layer, every spoon tap, every hand-tweaked synth she had edited herself. But the title had been changed. Midnight Tape by C. Lancaster. She turned her head. The blonde girl, Cassandra Lancaster, sat comfortably in the front row, chin resting on her hand, eyes unblinking. The instructor nodded approvingly. I didn't expect this from Lancaster. I'm genuinely impressed. You've clearly improved. Cassandra just smiled slightly. She didn't confirm. She didn't deny. Emma looked down at her hands. They were trembling. She didn't speak. Not because she didn't know how to confront, but because in the original email she hadn't signed her name. Just an attachment. No metadata, no watermark. The only proof was her memory. She had submitted it using a school computer, one anyone could access, with the shared password. And she knew exactly what they would ask if she spoke up. Do you have proof? Emma didn't. All she had was memory and silence. After class, Helena pulled Cassandra aside. Emma overheard snippets. I'm submitting this to the Paris exchange program. Your music fits perfectly. Cassandra replied quietly, just loud enough for Emma to hear. Yes, I was inspired by some pretty unusual melodies. Emma walked past as if she hadn't heard, but her heart was pounding so hard, her ears rang. That night, Emma reopened the original project. She revised the entire thing and titled it Version 0 before anyone knew my name. She didn't delete the old file, she saved it separately, then created a new arrangement, stronger, heavier, fiercer. She couldn't stop them from stealing. But she could create something they wouldn't dare take, because if they did, they'd expose themselves. Emma still remained silent, but from that moment on, she no longer wrote to learn. She wrote to protect her name. She thought if there was anyone in the academy who still saw her as a human being, it was Jaden. Jaden Kim, a senior teaching assistant for Studio 4A, the only person who once handed her a USB drive when he noticed her headphones were out of sync. The only one who had quietly asked you okay when the mocking video of her was being passed around. He didn't laugh, he didn't join in. And once when Emma was practicing in Studio 1C, Jaden walked by and left her a handwritten note. If you need better speakers, I have the key to room 2D. Feel free to borrow it. Emma never used it, but she folded the note and kept it in her coat pocket for an entire week. That week, the Academy held a submission call for original tracks for the annual event, the Manhattan Pulse. It was the biggest event of the year. Whoever got selected would get a chance to meet real music producers. Emma didn't submit anything, but Jaden had heard her working on a new track, something she called the Untitled Song. She only let him hear a short part before quickly shutting it off. Jaden was silent for a few seconds, then said, "You should submit this. It's better than anything I've heard in this class." Emma shook her head. "I don't want to cause trouble again." Jaden smiled softly. "Then let me submit it for you. No name anonymous. If they like it, we'll figure it out from there." Emma hesitated, then nodded. She had no one she could trust, but at that moment, she trusted him. The following week, the list of 5 selected tracks was announced. No names were made public, only the faculty and judges knew the real authors. Emma saw the third line. Track 3, Fragments of Silence. She recognized it instantly. Every silent gap, every muted note, the faint tremble of a sample she had recorded from the train, rumbling past her dorm. She didn't dare celebrate. She simply put on her headphones and replayed it over and over, as if asking herself, could someone else really sound exactly like me? 3 days later, during an internal meeting, Helena announced the creator of Track 3, Jaden Kim. Emma went numb. She turned to look at Jaden. He didn't look back. Helena's lips curled into a soft smile. "I always knew you had potential, Jaden. I doubted you at first, but you've truly surprised me." Emma waited for him to say something. Just one sentence. "It wasn't me," but Jaden simply replied, "Thank you. I worked really hard." She didn't remember how she left the room, only that her throat burned bitterly and her chest ached like someone had ripped it open barehanded. She hadn't spoken out when others stole her work, but this time, the person she trusted most had used her silence to climb onto the stage. That night, Emma sat in her room, the white glow of her laptop screen before her. She didn't play music. She didn't type. She just stared at the old project file, the one Jaden had said, "I can send it in for you." For the first time, she thought of deleting everything, but her hand stopped. She created a new folder and named it Start Again. But this time, no one submits it for me. The next morning, Emma took the earliest train out of Manhattan. Not to give up, but to go home, the only place where she didn't have to explain why she stayed silent. The train ride took 4 hours. When the carriage rolled past the riverbank, she took off her headphones. She didn't listen to music. She just watched the light drifting across the water. She realized it had been a long time since she had left a single moment untouched, a single sound unbroken, since she last allowed her mind to simply breathe. Her mother's house was unchanged. Faded tin roof, a wooden fence has eaten away at one corner. By the door, the tomato trellis she'd planted, never evenly red, but always bearing fruit each year. Her mother was hanging shirts on the line. She wasn't surprised, didn't ask why Emma came home, didn't hug her or smile. She just glanced once and said, "Got fried eggs with leftover rice." Want some? Emma nodded. The two sat at the old wooden table. No one turned on the TV. Each slice of the egg sounded like a quiet sigh. After a while, her mother said, "As long as you haven't given up, that's enough." Emma didn't lift her head, but her voice softened. "I'm not sure I have anything left." Her mother set down her chopsticks, looked her in the eye. "I once had my entire paycheck stolen. They called me stupid for trusting people, but I kept going because I had you. You don't have anyone to support, but if you quit, that little piece of goodness in this world loses a corner." Emma let out a shaky smile, choked. "I'm just writing music, Mum. It's not something big." Her mother poured more water into a plastic cup, looking at her like she was seeing something unfamiliar. "You write music, and they're scared enough to steal it, to gang up, just to crush you. Maybe you're stronger than you think." That night, Emma lay on the old mattress. Wind drifted in through the window, carrying the smell of damp earth and dusty printer paper. She replayed the track Jaden had stolen. This time, she didn't listen with her ears. She listened with her memory, with her childhood, with every sentence her mother had said over lunch, and every heartbeat that pulsed as her classmates laughed in her face. Tomorrow, she would return to Manhattan, not to prove anything, but simply to keep writing as if no one had ever tried to stop her. Emma returned to Manhattan on Monday morning. No one noticed she'd been gone for 3 days. No one asked. The class was the same. Laughter keyboard, clacking soda cans popping open, and the lonely silence of someone without a group. She still sat in the back row, still opened her laptop, still wore her old headphones. But one thing had changed. She started recording everything, not with a camera, but by preserving every original file, dating them, saving under her real name, sending copies to a backup email. Every beat she arranged, every project she worked on, she created a proof version, because she couldn't let anyone take anything from her ever again. One afternoon after class, Emma went down to practice in Studio 1C. The basement room was still hot and muggy like always. The speakers still buzzed. The walls were still damp. But today, she tried something new, a track with vocals. No one sang for her, so she sang herself, softly, just enough for the software to pick it up, just enough to make the beat feel alive. She didn't know that. The sound engineer on duty that day wasn't the usual one. It was Daniel, a student from the audio engineering department, newly assigned to monitor the practice room systems. Daniel didn't know Emma. He had only seen her name on the booking list, and he hadn't planned to pay attention. But while checking the signal feed, he heard the faint sound of singing, weak but different. It didn't sound like a vocal warm-up. It didn't sound like a mic test. There was something in that voice that made him pause instead of turning off the feed like usual. He stood outside the studio door, listening. An hour later, when Emma left the room, she didn't notice someone had adjusted the mic's position. She only knew she had finished a recording. The pitch was still shaky, the audio still rough, but for the first time, she didn't feel ashamed listening to her own voice. That night, Daniel replayed the recording while reviewing signal logs. He didn't know who had recorded it. The file name just said, "Draft a Vocal Try 3." But after listening all the way through, he sat in silence for a few seconds. In a system where everyone chased techniques, presets, and expensive effects, that distorted little track made him feel something he'd never felt in a school project, something real and raw. The next day he typed an email and sent it to the address listed in the file. "Sorry if this is intrusive, but if you really arranged that track, could you send me another one? I'm working on a personal project, and I think I should hear more." Emma read the email while standing in line to buy instant noodles. She read it 3 times. She didn't reply. But somewhere in her chest, something began to move. For the first time, someone had truly listened. Emma didn't respond to the email right away. She read it over and over, carefully checking each word. There was no invitation, no contract, no hollow compliments. Just one sentence, "I think I should hear more." It was the first time someone didn't ask, "What class are you in? What software do you use?" Or did someone fix it for you? Just a simple wish to listen more. 3 days later, Emma sent a short beat, a 45-second loop, rough and compact. She added a line, "If it doesn't work for you, that's okay too." Daniel didn't reply. That night, he sent back a mix. The background cleaned the stereo space clearer, but the raw texture intact. Like someone had wiped dust from a window, changing nothing, just letting the light through. From then on, every evening after class, Emma didn't return to her dorm right away. She went down to Studio 1C, opened her laptop, put on her old headphones, and produced music. Same old equipment, same free software. But now, after finishing each track, she sent it to Daniel, and he would send back a revised version. They didn't call it collaboration. They didn't say much at all. Just one rule no one could know. No one was allowed to know. Because if they did, Emma could be banned from using the studio, and Daniel, he could lose his system access permanently. A month later, Daniel sent Emma a brief, "I've been assigned to score background music for a street art podcast series. They want something real, unpolished. I want to use your loop, the one from the other day." Emma replied, "Okay, but don't put my name. I'm not ready." Daniel typed one word, "Understood." The podcast aired 3 weeks later. No one in class knew, but a producer in Brooklyn heard it. He messaged Daniel, "Where did you get that beat? I keep replaying it. It doesn't sound like anything student made. It's real." Daniel didn't reply right away. He just took a screenshot of the message and sent it to Emma with a note. "They don't know your name, but they're already hearing your voice." Emma didn't respond. But that night, she opened an old project, the one that once got her mocked as trash style. She didn't delete it, didn't remake it. She just renamed it Original Version, not Silent anymore. In class, everything looked the same. Emma was still ignored. No one called her name during group work. Cassandra was still the name mentioned in every internal bulletin. Jaden was still being patted on the back by Professor Helena as the Academy's rising hope. But one thing had changed. One day, while Daniel was testing the audio system, he accidentally played a beat Emma had just sent him. It lasted less than 10 seconds before he turned it off. But Cassandra heard it. She turned her head without saying a word. But her eyebrows tightened slightly. The next day, she stayed after class. Longer than usual. No one noticed, but Daniel did. She lingered near the mixer, pretending to ask about a plugin, but her eyes were locked on the screen. She didn't ask who that beat belonged to, but she remembered it clearly. The style was hauntingly similar to the track she had once stolen. She used to think Emma would always be a voiceless shadow, but now, something very much like Emma was playing from the main sound system right in her classroom. She wasn't sure if Daniel knew, but if he did, and had stayed silent all this time to gather evidence, then the position she held could disappear at any moment. Since that day, Cassandra hasn't smiled as much, didn't rush out of class, didn't ignore Daniel the way she used to. She stayed late, quiet, listening carefully, not to learn, but to make sure she was still in control. 1 week later, Studio 1C was suddenly locked. No email, no announcement, no technician showed up as usual, just a single, bold notice taped to the door, access suspended. Technical maintenance. But no maintenance ever came. And at the same time, Daniel's tech account, the second-year student who had supported lower-level classes, was abruptly restricted. When he tried logging into the podcast system, a red warning appeared: access temporarily revoked. Contact supervising faculty. Daniel frowned. That same evening, an email from Professor Helena landed in his inbox. Due to concerns about possible misuse of internal resources, your access privileges will be temporarily restricted. Please direct all communication to the academic office. Daniel didn't yet understand what was happening, but the memory of Cassandra's glance at his screen, then quickly turning away, made him pause. Cassandra was always composed, but Daniel had once seen her intently listening to a very peculiar ambient track, one Emma had once called her breath piece. Reversed echoes, mixed with human voices, choked into distortion. Daniel had never shared that file, but just a few days ago, an internal podcast aired a track featuring that exact sound sender, Cassandra. He plugged in his headphones, played it on loop. His chest turned cold. That night, Daniel used an old system login he still had from a past internship. He combed through metadata and system logs for internal sessions. After nearly 3 hours of digging, he found it: track Silent Pulse Original Session, Studio 1C, timestamp 22:48, the 5th of last month, device Coldev, Emma's personal device. Daniel froze. He'd been in the next room that night. He still remembered the moment Emma smiled after nailing the breath effect for the first time. He jumped from his desk, hands shaking. Not from fear, but rage. Rage at a system that thought it could erase everything by locking a door, changing a title, and pretending Emma never existed. That same night, Daniel messaged Emma, "I need to see you. Urgent." They met in the back courtyard of the academy. Emma quietly handed Daniel a notebook filled with her handwritten notes, track ideas, dates, device IDs, and even the file name Fragments of Silence. She didn't say much, only whispered, "Cassandra's not the only one." Daniel stood silent. "Jaden," Emma said. "He asked to submit a track for me, and then it showed up under his name." "You're sure?" Daniel asked, eyes narrowing. Emma just nodded, her gaze dry. "At first I thought it was a misunderstanding, but he's still silent." Daniel said nothing more, but inside, a fire surged, not just because Emma had been betrayed, but because he too had once admired Jaden as a role model. That night, Daniel dug deeper into the system logs. This time, he searched for the track, Fragments of Silence, the one selected for the Manhattan Pulse, announced under Jaden's name. Original file name: no name, XP Mix 3 DMC device, Coldev creation, time 21:09, 3 days before the deadline. Daniel knew instantly. Only Emma used EMC in her file names. Even more damning, the metadata showed Jaden had logged into Studio 1C at that exact time when Emma wasn't there. Daniel saved all the data, made multiple backups. "We're bringing this to light. No one gets to speak in her place anymore." Studio 4A, Monday morning. The classroom was quieter than usual. Jaden was working on his laptop, at the front, one earbud, in, whispering something to Cassandra, sitting beside him. Helena entered last, a folder in hand, and her usual smile, her eyes sweeping quickly across the room like she was checking her chessboard. Emma hadn't arrived yet. The door opened just as Helena was about to speak. Emma walked in, holding her familiar USB drive. The room tensed. Helena frowned and stepped forward. "Emma, I don't think today's session has a slot for you." Emma didn't answer. She simply walked straight to the control panel. Daniel, already waiting, stood and spoke clearly. "Please let her present. She has proof." Helena paused. A flicker of hesitation passed, but then she shrugged, turning back as if nothing was worth worrying about. If you want a little surprise show, I won't stop you. Emma plugged in the USB. The main screen lit up. A music production interface appeared. Then, the audio began familiar, but this time with a different kind of gravity. The sound of a train passing, reversed breathing, soft drums, a strangled-sounding sample. It was the track Silent Pulse, previously submitted under Cassandra's name. But now the metadata is displayed clearly, line by line. Author E.M. Koldev, recording location, Studio 1C, timestamp 22:48. 5th of last month, device Emma's external hard drive. Fingerprint match 99.8%. Daniel stepped up and explained each line. E.M. Koldev is Emma Collins's personal device ID. Recorded at nearly 11 p.m. the 5th of last month from Studio 1C. No one else used that room that night except Emma. The entire class was silent. Helena stood behind Daniel, her eyes cold, but she didn't interfere. Daniel continued showing the system log. Cassandra had uploaded this exact file on the 8th. No edits, no extra layers, no changed effects. Every parameter was identical. One student whispered, "It's like a copy-paste." Daniel nodded. More accurately, it's theft. A chair scraped the floor. Cassandra stood, voice steady. "Yes, it's a beautiful arrangement, but I only sampled it from the system and recreated it. I have the right if there's no specific copyright. Who owns a breath anyway?" Daniel turned to her. "This wasn't a recreation. Metadata shows you didn't create anything. You just changed the name and the sender. The file is an exact match to what Emma recorded that night." Cassandra clutched her bag strap slightly, but said nothing more. Daniel didn't stop. And this isn't the only track. The screen switched to a second file. Fragments of Silence. This was the piece Emma had finished 3 days before the deadline and asked Jaden to submit anonymously. The metadata now showed original file name, no name, ND expert mix, MC original device, EM Col Dev, official sender, jkim.studio. Mail sent time, 14:07, 3 days before the deadline. Server note submission, matched user Jaden Kim Daniel, explained this file starts with EEMC, Emma's naming pattern. Jaden submitted it using his studio email, then claimed full credit. There was no remix, no editing. The metadata is a full match. Jaden jumped up. I thought she gave permission. I thought I was just helping her submit it." Daniel: "She agreed to submit anonymously, but you renamed the file and registered the credit to yourself. That's fraud." Helena stayed silent. No defense, no denial, no questions. Emma still stood there. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes, for the first time, didn't avoid anyone's gaze. A female student teared up. "We laughed at her, and she's the only one here who actually makes music for the love of it." A male student near the back added, "Next time someone submits something, I want to know it's real, not stolen." Daniel turned off the screen. The classroom stayed utterly quiet. But this time, the silence no longer carried contempt. It was the silence of realization. Emma bowed her head, but not to avoid their eyes, to take a breath and move forward. No one said a word after Daniel turned off the screen. The class felt frozen, in a strange state. No one dared to clap, but no one could look away either. Jaden remained standing beside his desk, lips pressed tight. Cassandra had already sat down, her eyes fixed on a blank page in her notebook. Helena stepped up to the front podium. No expression, no defense, no surprise. She simply picked up her folder as if nothing had just happened. "We should move on with the workshop," she said, voice flat. "Whoever has prepared their track for today, please present." A male student shot up from his seat. "Wait, are you seriously going to ignore this?" Helena didn't turn around. I think everything has been clearly presented. If anyone wishes to file a complaint, take it to the academic office. A murmur spread through the middle rows. A female student whispered, she knew from the start. What another turned to her. Helena. She supervises Studio 1C. If anyone accesses the room after hours, the system sends an email alert to the faculty. All eyes turned toward Helena. She didn't respond. She just quietly packed her papers. But her hands, usually steady, now trembled slightly as she zipped up her bag. Daniel stepped forward. His voice was calm, but firm. You received an alert about unauthorized access on the 5th of last month. You knew that track wasn't Cassandra's, but you still approved her submission. Didn't you? Helena looked up at Daniel, a look that lasted longer than usual, not to deny, but almost to confirm. What do you want, Daniel? She asked, her voice no longer arrogant, just hollow. He replied, we want the truth acknowledged, and at the very least, for no one else to be silenced. Another student stood up, eyes on Helena. If it were me, I wouldn't be able to keep teaching, like nothing happened. Helena didn't respond. She just turned away, opened the faculty door. Before stepping out, she looked back directly at Emma. Not a word. Emma looked up, returning the gaze for the first time, not with hatred, not with fear, just quiet resolve. The door closed behind Helena. No one laughed. No one spoke. But something in the room had shifted, not because anyone raised their voice, but because for the first time, silence held real weight. Jaden stood, then sat back down, as if he was going to say something, but realized nothing could undo what had been done. Cassandra sat frozen, hands clenched. Her face wasn't red, but the collar of her shirt was soaked with sweat. A student leaned over and asked softly, "Are you planning to stay in this class?" Cassandra didn't answer, but her eyes wavered. Emma still stood, near the projector. She scanned the room, not looking for sympathy, just making sure she was finally being seen. Daniel stood beside her. He said nothing, but his look was clear. You don't have to walk alone anymore. At the back of the room, one student had already pulled out their phone, replaying the metadata reveal. Another opened their laptop, typing into the campus forum. The track Silent Pulse played again. This time not from the projector, but from a pair of headphones, being passed from hand to hand. Someone whispered, "Listen again. This time, you know who it belongs to." And for the first time in weeks, the name Emma Collins was no longer followed by the word anonymous. 1 hour later, the video showing the metadata presentation was leaked on the Academy's internal forum. That night, a thread titled "Silent Pulse, the Real Composer" surpassed 200 comments. By the next morning, it was pinned to the top of the page by the student admin team. The classroom was no longer the same. The atmosphere in Studio 4A now felt like a thin layer of coal dust. No one dared to stir it, but everyone knew that one spark could ignite the whole thing. Cassandra showed up pale, still wearing her usual light blue blazer, but the cuffs were wrinkled like she hadn't been alert enough to iron them. Jaden didn't show up at all. Instead, an email was sent to the entire class directly from the Academic Affairs Office. Within 72 hours, individuals involved in the Silent Pulse and Fragments of Silence copyright matter must submit an official written report. Failure to do so will result in an independent investigation by the board. Emma read the email on her phone, her hand gently tightening around her bag strap. Daniel, seated next to her, glanced at the screen and nodded slightly. It's starting. Night 1. At the women's dorm, Cassandra barely left her room. Her roommate, a film major, messaged a group chat. She's been writing something since the afternoon. Looks pale. no food, keeps tearing up sheets of paper. On the other side, Jaden wasn't replying to any messages. His Instagram was flooded with dozens of comments, so fragments was stolen. Why would you do that to Emma? Lost all respect, Jay. Daniel remained cautious. He double-checked all the files, created additional offline backups, and submitted a copy to the student council. Emma returned to her tiny apartment in Queens. She sat beside an old cassette box and quietly played her very first arrangement, the one that was never finished. For the first time, she didn't hear it with sadness, but with gratitude, because that track reminded her she was worthy. Night 2. An anonymous source posted a system log to the forum confirming the metadata and the Studio 1C access history. Attached was a screenshot of an email from Helena, verifying that Jaden's account had accessed the studio during the exact time frame Emma had been absent. The forum exploded. One top-voted comment read, "If professors cover this up, then what's the point of the truth?" Another student uploaded a photo of Helena from a past workshop, cold eyes, holding a chart titled Professional Ethics. The caption read, "Irony 101. Helena didn't appear at school that day." The academic office issued a notice saying she had requested leave to manage personal matters. Night 3. Cassandra arrived in class with her hair down, no makeup, and no designer clothes. She walked straight to Emma's desk and stood silently for a few seconds. The entire class held its breath. Emma didn't look up. Cassandra gently placed a thin envelope on her desk, then stepped back without saying a word. Daniel glanced over. Inside was a written statement. Cassandra had signed it. Sender, Cassandra Lee. The header is printed in bold, admission of unauthorized use of another student's audio material. Emma picked it up, but didn't read the whole thing. She simply folded it and slipped it into her coat pocket. Jaden still didn't show up, but that afternoon, the academy sent an email to the entire class. Jaden Kim is officially suspended from academic activity pending final disciplinary board review. The class was silent. No one cheered, no one gloated. Only eyes turned toward Emma this time. Not with pity, but with recognition. Friday, 10 a.m. Emma received an official notice from the Office of Academic Affairs. You are requested to appear at hearing room B103 to assist with an academic investigation regarding music copyright. The letter didn't include details, but everyone knew this was the formal hearing. No longer just a student dispute. This was the system being forced to confront itself. Room B103 was deep in the west basement, once used for the music department's most rigorous evaluations. No windows, thick concrete walls. A long rectangular table with 3 microphones placed in the center pointed at the middle seat. Emma arrived with Daniel. He didn't say much. He simply handed her the USB containing all backup files. Waiting outside were 2 staff from Academic Affairs, 1 internal communications officer, and an assistant to the department head. At the center of the table sat Professor Everett, head of the investigation panel, an older man with a spotless record. On either side of him were the associate dean and a student representative. On the table, each track was pulled up one by one. Silent pulse fragments of silence, along with the original files from Emma's device. Metadata system log screenshots, Cassandra's signed statement, Helena's emails, everything was carefully organized. Daniel sat in the back row. Emma was invited to the center seat. Miss Collins, Professor Everett began, "Can you confirm were these files created by you?" Emma nodded. "Yes. And do you have supporting evidence?" Daniel stood up. "I retrieved this data from the internal system. This includes timestamp alignment device logs and studio access history. All records match Emma's equipment." Professor Everett flipped through the file without rushing. We've received the written statement from Cassandra Lee. And yesterday, we also received a written response from Jaden Kim, who declined to appear today. The room remained silent. Everett looked up, but what's most concerning is this. He pulled out a printed email, one sent by instructor Helena to the tech team requesting Daniel's access be revoked on the grounds of unauthorized system interference. Ms. Collins, he continued, do you know why Helena requested Daniel's account be locked the very day he began investigating these files? Emma looked at him, then at Daniel, then back, because someone was afraid of being exposed. Everett gave a slight nod. Short answer, but direct. The room thickened with tension. Then why didn't you report this sooner? The associate dean asked. Emma was quiet. After a pause, she answered, because back then, I didn't think anyone would believe me. That made the room fall into an even deeper silence. Everett leaned back in his chair. We've reviewed all the data, and I won't wait until next week. He turned to the academic officer. Prepare disciplinary notices for Jaden Kim and Cassandra Lee. Then he turned to Emma. As for you, I believe not everyone could remain silent this long and still carry their dignity. There was no applause, no visible emotion, but every gaze in the room rested on her, a wordless recognition. Daniel stepped forward and gently handed her the USB. We don't need to say anything yet, he whispered, because for the first time, the truth is speaking for itself. Emma held the USB and then walked out of the windowless room. And for the first time, the door behind her didn't close like an ending, but as if it were opening to something far bigger. 3 hours after the hearing, the music department building entered a strange kind of stillness. Not silence, but a state of suspension. Every hallway, classroom, and student lounge felt tight like a wire waiting to snap. On the lobby TV screen, the digital bulletin flashed a brief message. Urgent notice 2. Students suspended for severe academic ethics violations. Effective immediately. No names were listed, but everyone knew who. A group of third years sat in the lounge, phones in hand. One read aloud from a group chat, Cassandra's been suspended. Jaden is avoiding the board, refusing to cooperate. Another student whispered, he used to be the face of the academy. Now he's banned from even attending graduation. The girl next to him nodded, visibly stunned. I used to look up to Jaden. Now, I don't know who to believe anymore. On the third floor of the library, a cluster of first years was searching for older track files in the system. Back then, when Emma played that breath sample, I thought she was copying Cassandra. No, Cassandra took it from Emma. And Jaden stole a different one, but they both came from the same person. Another student looked around and whispered, she never defended herself, never complained. She just stood there and let the truth speak. They started passing around the original file Daniel had anonymously posted on the school forum. This is the real one, full metadata included. Emma made both tracks. Out in the campus courtyard, quiet murmurs gathered momentum. Several student groups were signing a petition addressed to the administration. A formal apology is requested for student Emma Collins, and official credit for the compositions must be corrected in the records. The petition was initiated by Amanda, president of the Electronic Sound Club. She posted openly in the group chat, we live in an environment that claims to foster creativity, but if that creativity isn't protected, who would dare to keep creating? The petition reached 200 signatures that same afternoon. In an empty classroom, Helena sat alone. No one knew what she was thinking, but all messages sent to her from the system remained unanswered. A few younger faculty murmured in the staff lounge, she knew. She used to be the sharpest one. Maybe she knew but didn't dare push back. Or maybe she wanted to believe that silence could make it all blow over. That night, Emma sat in Studio 1C. The room had been reopened. No one blocked her now. No one controlled her anymore. Daniel sat in the back, adjusting the audio quietly. "Do you want to submit something new?" he asked softly. Emma didn't answer right away. She was wearing her headphones, listening to her original arrangement, unedited, untitled, untouched. She didn't smile, didn't nod. She just sat still and opened a new file. Fill name found, U1 EMCA name, with no drama, no declaration. Just the first quiet whisper from someone who was once lost in the hallway and was now finding her way back to herself. 3 days later, an internal announcement from the board of directors was sent to all students and faculty. After a thorough review of technical data and the academic submission process, the disciplinary committee has confirmed errors in the attribution of authorship to student Emma Collins. We sincerely apologize for shortcomings in our review process and commit to updating all institutional records to ensure transparency and fairness. Beneath it, in smaller text, Emma Collins is fully reinstated with academic privileges and recommended for the Outstanding Creative Achievement of the Year award. The message spread like a wave. Within an hour, over 400 shares appeared on the school forum. One top comment read, "She didn't need to shout. It was her silence that forced the system to speak." The internal publication of New York's creative tech industry reported a serious case at Manhattan's top arts academy has just come to light. The award-winning tracks, Silent Pulse and Fragments of Silence, were both created by the same student, one who had gone unnamed until now. Meanwhile, international forums on experimental music began noticing the alias EM_Dev. A producer in Berlin wrote, "It's been a long time since I heard an arrangement so simple, yet gut-wrenching. This girl has a fractured emotion, like someone who's been silenced too long." Jaden was no longer seen on campus. Rumors circulated that he had transferred to another school. But one of his emails was leaked. "I didn't think things would go this far. I just didn't have the courage to do the right thing then. But I accept full responsibility." Cassandra remained silent. She didn't defend herself, didn't apologize, never returned to class. A senior student spotted her at Penn Station walking quickly without looking back, and Helena, she still showed up to class, but her gaze no longer had its former shine. At a closed faculty meeting, one professor spoke up, "I don't think we can blame just the students. A system that only permits one kind of talent, that's the real problem." Helena didn't react, but as she exited the room, she paused at the doorway, her eyes drifting toward the hallway where Emma used to sit alone for hours. No one knew what she was thinking, but for the first time, she didn't walk away in haste. That night, the mixing room at Studio 1C, once locked, was now glowing. Emma sat alone. No filming, no live stream, no submissions, just a private session for something new. Daniel arrived and handed her a water bottle. He didn't say anything. He knew today marked a turning point, but also knew no celebration was needed. Emma didn't need that. She put on her headphones, hit record, and closed her eyes. The first sound was a breath, but this time not choked, not reversed. A real breath, soft, round, and alive. She named the file Breath Found 01 EMC. The next day, an email arrived in Emma's inbox from the Academy. Just one sentence. "We would like to request permission to feature your track at the upcoming New Voices of New York event next month." Emma didn't respond immediately. She closed her laptop, stood, and walked outside. The early spring sunlight touched her shoulders, not harsh, not loud, just enough to let her know another door was opening. And this time, she was walking through it, without needing anyone to lead her. 3 weeks later, at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, MoMA. The Grand Hall on the third floor had been transformed into a special space for New Voices of New York, an annual event honoring emerging talents in experimental music across the Northeast. The invitation listed 12 names. Emma Collins was not one of them, not because she was forgotten, but because she didn't submit an application. Daniel arrived early, carrying the same hard drive Emma had used to arrange Silent Pulse. He handed it to the organizers with a simple note, a composition owned by no one except the one who chose silence. It took the organizers nearly a week to trace it back to Emma. And once they verified the metadata, they asked just one question. Are you willing to let the audience hear your voice for the first time? As yourself, Emma said nothing, not out of hesitation, but because she was choosing to enter that space on her own terms. No stage, no spotlight, just a chair and headphones. Event night. Hall 3 didn't use a stage as usual. Instead, 12 small chairs were placed in an arc each, with a pair of high-end headphones connected to a mini player. Every player bore the artist's name, printed boldly on black. Only one chair had no name. No one sat in it for the first hour, until a girl with curly brown hair walked over, pressed play, and stopped eyes wide. Then came a second listener, then a third. Gradually, that nameless chair drew more people. Then they returned. Then they stayed longer. A music critic nearby took notes. No one knows who she is. But this piece made me feel like I was hearing my own mind speak for the first time. No climax, not easy to hear, but impossible to turn off. Across the room, Emma stood near the emergency exit. No one noticed her, just someone in a simple knit coat, hair tied loosely, clutching an old notebook. She looked at that chair. No spotlight touched it, yet the music played on through the headphones, through the silent eyes of each listener, and through the emptiness the chair itself represented. Outside MoMA, an LED news ticker ran a track with no official author is stirring up the New Voices event. The question is no longer who made it, but why does it take this long to be heard? Daniel walked over and handed Emma a cup of hot cocoa. He said nothing. She smiled. For the first time, fully. After the event, Emma returned to her dorm. On her desk was a new email from an independent studio in Berlin. No portfolio needed. No bio required. We just want to know, do you want to make something next for yourself? Emma didn't reply right away. She turned to her old notebook. On the first page, it read, First composition. Not for grades, not for awards, just to hold on to my own breath. And she began sketching again. Not notes, not effects, but a circle, a space, a nameless chair, where someday someone else who had also been forgotten might sit, and for the first time be heard. No need to speak loudly, no need for an introduction, just the quiet belief that their voice deserves to exist. There are women who don't need to shout to be heard, who doesn't need to strike back to prove they're right, and who doesn't need to defeat anyone to overcome themselves. Emma didn't retaliate. She didn't slam tables. She didn't expose anyone. She simply stepped into the light, carrying the truth, and let the truth speak for itself. This story isn't just about plagiarism. It's not just about injustice in a rigid academic system. It's about the loneliness of being kind in a place where status can make people dishonest. It's about the quiet bravery of someone who stood up, not to be applauded, but so she would no longer be buried. And perhaps the biggest lesson is this. In a world that so easily believes in the spotlight and applause, we still need someone who dares to believe in integrity. That sometimes the only thing you need to make an entire system stop is to stop being silent. If you've ever felt dismissed, unheard, or forced to stay quiet in a room full of noise, remember, you are not alone. Follow and subscribe to Toch Story so you won't miss the stories that might just help you believe again in the quiet power of truth. Because we believe even the smallest truth can shake an entire room.